Information discussed in this podcast may be sensitive in nature to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. The new Lisbon State School has housed thousands of people since its doors opened in 1914. The facility has gone through a lot of changes over the decades, but it was always a home for developmentally handicapped or disabled children and adults. The New Lisbon State School is located in New Lisbon, New Jersey. Records and documentation regarding incidents that happened there are scarce, including information on the 3 disappearances we are talking about today. David Williams was 12 years old in 1975. He suffered from epilepsy and took daily medication. Stephen Anderson disappeared with David Williams. Stephen was 17 years old. Kenneth Schweigart was 46 years old in 1982 when he vanished. All 3 disappeared from the grounds of the New Lisbon State School. Where are David Williams, Stephen Anderson, and Kenneth Schweigart? Hello, and welcome to a bonus episode of the Where Are They podcast. Today's story is a sad one, and even more heartbreaking is the lack of information on what happened here. No one's talking about it. These 3 people, David and Stephen, both children, and Kenneth, a 46-year-old man, disappeared from a state institution. This should be talked about. Before we dive into their stories and the very little that we do have on them, I want to take a close look at the facility they went missing from. The New Lisbon State School, also called the New Lisbon Developmental Center. The New Lisbon Center opened in 1914 as a place to house developmentally disabled men and women. It would change names a few times throughout the years. It was called the Vineland State School, the 4 Mile Colony, and the Colony for Boys. It would become a place that was for boys and men only, although in the 1990s, it would once again be a co-ed institution. New Lisbon, still around today, serves hundreds and is a federally and state-funded facility receiving about $75 million a year in state and federal funds. It's also located in a fairly remote area of New Jersey, surrounded by woods, nature reserves, and even creeks and waterways. In fact, the facility itself consists of 1,896 acres. There was an interesting interview that I came across with a man by the name of Bernie White, who was Deputy Director of Institutional Operations at DDD in New Jersey from 1955 through 1987. He was serving as Deputy Director. At the time, all 3 of these people disappeared from the institution. In his interview, he said that during his time in office, New Lisbon was a center for high-functioning males, people that they would hopefully be able to reintegrate into an adult foster home or even possibly living on their own in the future. In 1975, David and Stephen were roommates at the all-male New Lisbon State School, as it was known at that time. They were also friends, despite the fact that David was just 12 and Stephen was 17. David Edwards Williams was born on October 9th, 1962. He was diagnosed with epilepsy and had to take daily medication to manage his seizures. He was also known to wear a helmet at all times, which was to protect his head in the event that he did suffer a seizure. When he was last seen, in fact, he was wearing his helmet. We don't know much about his family life, including relatives, but it has been mentioned in several sources that his family did keep searching for him after he disappeared. Stephen Eugene Anderson was born May 25th, 1957. He was 17 years old. He did have some communication impairments, but beyond that, we're not really sure what other developmental delays he may have had. It was, however, mentioned that both boys needed assistance with everyday tasks and would not have been able to take care of themselves on their own. On April 7th, 1975, Stephen and David were outside playing ball. Around 4 p.m., they decided to head back towards their room, which was located in the Vine Cottage on the property. Staff did indicate that they did see them walking back towards their room, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. David was even wearing his helmet, as he always did. At that time, the school had over 1,000 people on the premises, residents and staff. I did try to find some numbers to see what the staff-resident ratio was like back then. There does seem to be a lot of documentation that New Lisbon, throughout the years, did suffer from staffing shortages. But at that time in 1975, not sure how many of those 1,000 people were staff and how many were residents. Some have also said later that they thought they saw the boys walking towards the woods, but it's really hard to know what is factual, especially since at the time, very little was documented about what happened. I did try to confirm some other bits of information regarding the disappearance, such as who reported the boys missing? When did they report them missing? For instance, did the boys not show up for dinner and that's when staff knew they were missing? I have a lot of questions regarding that specific timeline, but those are answers we just don't have. And then what happened once the staff noticed they were missing? Did they search the grounds first and then call in police? How long did they search on their own? We know that they eventually did report them missing, and local authorities did come in and conduct searches of the area. But no sign of either Stephen or David was found, not even David's helmet. At first, it was left to local authorities, which included the New Lisbon Local Police and the New Jersey Department of Human Services. Eventually, the New Jersey State Police would become involved as well. Interestingly, less than 2 weeks before, on March 25th of that year, 2 young girls were shopping at the Wheaton Shopping Plaza in a suburb of Washington, D.C., Wheaton, Maryland, when they literally would vanish into thin air. The 2 girls, Catherine and Sheila Lyons, were 10 and 12 years old and were just spending the day hanging out. They were seen a few times throughout the day, and around 2 to 3 p.m., a neighbor remembers seeing the girls walking away from the shopping center and towards their home, which would make sense. The girls were supposed to be home by 4 p.m. They would never make it home. In fact, they would never be seen or heard from again. The case of the Lyons sisters was big news in the area. It was a huge case, but the girls were never found. And then, less than 2 weeks later, in New Lisbon, New Jersey, which is about 3 hours away by car, 2 boys go missing. Was there a connection? It was talked about, but nothing really officially linked the cases other than 2 minors disappeared at the same time together. Was there someone out there targeting young people? Kind of seems a stretch that these cases are connected in any way, but until there's a resolution for either one, I suppose it can't be ruled out. In 2013, there was a person of interest named in the case of the Lyons sisters, although the connection was only made because of a resemblance between a mugshot and a sketch of a man that was seen hanging around the area where the girls were. To this day, the Lyons sisters have not been found. In 1982, 7 years after David and Stephen disappeared, another resident of New Lisbon State School would also vanish. Kenneth Schweigart was born on June 25th, 1935. In 1982, Kenneth had been a resident of the facility for 4 years at that point. His family was from the Garfield, New Jersey area, but that's all we really know about Kenneth and his background. The only notation on Kenneth's file is that he had a low IQ and needed some help with daily tasks. He was gentle and liked and was labeled a nonviolent resident. He was apparently seen walking away from the campus at 11:45 a.m. on March 2nd, 1982, and has never been seen or heard from again. And that is all we know about Kenneth Schweigart. And this is really sad because I have so many questions. Where was he walking to? Where was he supposed to be going? Who saw him there? There is some discussion of the search for David and Stephen, but there's no mention of searches for Kenneth. I also couldn't find any news articles on Kenneth's case, even archived articles. The cases of all three, David, Stephen, and Kenneth, would go cold. In 2017, the FBI would join in with the New Jersey authorities and reopen the case of David Williams and Stephen Anderson. They planned on conducting new interviews and searching the nature reserve adjacent to the facility. They did announce that they learned some interesting new bits of information and that they believed that a break in the case was going to happen soon. That was 5 years ago, and we haven't had any additional updates from the FBI. Now, I do want to take a little bit deeper look at the new Lisbon State School. State-funded institutions have a history of poor treatment, especially pre-1980s. And many former workers from the facility have come forward to talk about abuse and the terrible things that would go on at the new Lisbon school. And in more recent history, I did find quite a bit of legal issues surrounding the school. In 2003, the Attorney General opened an investigation as they had received reports of horrible treatment and consistent abuse of the residents. The findings of that investigation were documented in a 35-page brief. And the brief is eye-opening. I could spend hours going into the details and through each page of this brief, but I'm actually going to pull out and read to you some specific incidents that are noted in this filing. Robert, April 17th, 2002. Staff member punched resident in the chest. Jennifer, March 1st, 2002. Staff member called resident degrading and undignified names. Adam, February 27th, 2002. Staff member forcefully pushed Adam into his room, causing him to collide with a chair on the far side of the room. Henry, February 27th, 2002. Staff member took Henry and other residents to her house to clean up dog waste in her backyard. Angela, February 24th, 2002. Staff member was seen holding Angela's face guard and shaking her head up and down while screaming at her. Wilson, February 9th, 2002. Staff member intentionally smeared glue on Wilson's face and failed to remove the glue before it dried. Removal of the dry glue was painful. Paula, January 25th, 2002. Staff member slapped Paula in the face and pinched her, quote, because she is a dark-skinned Black person and bruises don't show up on her, end quote. There were 2 large bruises on Paula's right breast. Staff member also struck the heel of her hand on Paula's forehead. Staff member also directed profanity at the resident and verbally threatened her. So after that investigation, the New Lisbon State School would be assigned a federal monitor to see that the patients would get the care they deserved. The courts recognized there was abuse going on at the school. They ordered this federal monitor to be in place from 2004 to 2009 for 5 years. So shortly after the school no longer needed a monitor, later in 2009, another tragedy befalls the school. And people once again start wondering what is going on there. James Hollis Jr. arrived at a nearby hospital from the New Lisbon Developmental Center on the morning of December 11th, 2009. His body temperature was 84 degrees. His hip and several ribs were broken. He was in such bad shape, he was unable to stand. James actually died from his injuries later that day. In 2011, James's family filed a lawsuit against the school claiming abuse and negligence. So what really happened to David, Stephen, and Kenneth? Did they wander off and have an accident? Did they wander off and get picked up by someone? Or did something happen to them at the school that was covered up? To this day, no one knows. David Williams was 12 years old in 1975. He would today be 59 years old. He is described as a black male, 5 foot tall, and weighing around 110 pounds when he disappeared in April of 1975. He was wearing his epilepsy helmet when he was last seen. Stephen Anderson was 17 years old in 1975. He would today be 64. Stephen is described as a Caucasian male, 5 foot 7 inches tall, and weighing around 140 pounds when he disappeared. Stephen has blonde hair and blue eyes and likes to be called Teve. Kenneth Schweigart was 46 years old when he vanished in 1982. He is described as a Caucasian male, 5 foot 8 inches tall, and weighing around 150 pounds. He had graying brown hair in March of 1982. If you have any information on David Williams, Stephen Anderson, or Kenneth Schweigart, any information at all, please contact the Atlantic City Resident Agency of the FBI at 609-677-6400. These cases are really bizarre to me. How do 3 people go missing from a place with a dark history of abuse and no one really talks about it? The media doesn't go running with it? So strange to me. And it's so sad that these people disappeared, vanished into thin air. People that relied on others to take care of them. It's absolutely devastating. Thank you all so much for listening to this episode. It is a little different from our normal stories, of course, but still a very important story to tell. We will be back again next week with another unsolved missing person case. And until then, stay safe and hug your loved ones.